Picture it, July 20th, 1969. You're crowded into a living room, the shag carpet tickling your knees. The only light is the ghostly glow of a fuzzy, black, and white TV. On screen, something that looks like a tinfoil spider descends toward a silent, gray landscape. There is no sound but the hiss of static and the voice of mission control, counting down the final feet. Then, the iconic image flickers to life. A single white boot, impossibly clean, presses into fine, dark dust. A voice, crackling with 250,000 miles of distance, says the words, "That's one small step for man." But as the world celebrated, a different story was already being written in the shadows. A story of the greatest deception ever staged. The core claim of the conspiracy is this: the Apollo 11 moon landing in July 1969 and all subsequent landings were an elaborate hoax. They were staged by the US government to decisively win the space race against the Soviet Union.
Wait, what? So the whole thing? The giant leap for mankind was just a really, really expensive school play?
That's the argument. And it's not just a random internet theory, it has a specific origin point. It started with a man named Bill Kaysing, who actually worked for a NASA contractor.
Exactly. In 1976, Kaysing self-published a book called We Never Went to the Moon. It laid out the foundational arguments from technological shortfalls to photographic anomalies that have fueled the hoax movement ever since.
And then, I'm guessing Fox News entered the chat.
You're not wrong. The theory was supercharged for a new generation in 2001 when the Fox television network aired a primetime special, Conspiracy Theory. Did we land on the moon? Presenting Kaysing's claims to millions and giving them a fresh coat of mainstream credibility. To understand the why of the hoax theory, you have to understand the Cold War. The space race wasn't just about scientific discovery. It was a global high-stakes proxy war for ideological supremacy between the United States and the Soviet Union.
So it was basically the world's most expensive and dangerous pissing contest. Got it!
In a way, yes. Every launch was a headline, every success a victory for either capitalism or communism. The pressure to win wasn't just about pride. It was about proving your entire system of government was superior.
And in the early days, the Soviets were winning. They launched Sputnik in 1957, and then put the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, in April 1961. So just a month later, President Kennedy went before Congress and made a monumental promise. America would land a man on the moon by the end of the decade.
And that put a ticking clock on NASA. It wasn't an aspiration anymore. It was a national deadline with the whole world watching.
That's the ultimate procrastination move. It'll just tell everyone I'm going to do this incredibly hard thing, and then future me has to figure it out. I respect the hustle.
This pressure is the core of Bill Kaysing's argument. He claimed the technology in 1969 simply wasn't reliable. According to him, NASA's own internal failure analyses showed a catastrophically low chance of success.
Hold on. Did Kaysing ever produce these supposed internal NASA documents? Or was he just claiming to have inside knowledge?
He claimed it based on his experience as a technical writer. The argument is that rather than face the humiliation of failure and potentially dead astronauts on global television, NASA chose to fake the whole thing.
So the plan was, the dog ate my homework, but look, I have this amazing professionally shot video of me doing my homework.
That's essentially the proposed method for the hoax. Theorists argue that NASA filmed the lunar surface missions on a secure, secret soundstage here on Earth, simply repurposing the high-fidelity training mock-ups and simulators they were already using to prepare the astronauts.
And to be fair, those simulators were incredibly detailed. They had to be for the training to be effective. It creates a sliver of plausibility. They already had the sets, so to speak.
So you're telling me faking news about the moon isn't even an original idea?
Not at all. Conspiracy believers often point to the Great Moon Hoax of 1835. A series of articles in the New York Sun newspaper claimed a famous astronomer had discovered winged humanoids and bizarre creatures living on the moon.
And people bought it, for a while at least. It was a satire, but it proved that if the story is good enough, you can convince the public of just about anything, even life on the moon. It set a strange historical precedent.
Okay, let's get into the physical evidence hoax proponents point to. The most famous is the American flag. In the video and photos, as the astronauts plant it, it clearly seems to wave and flutter.
And the argument is straightforward: there is no wind in a vacuum. A waving flag suggests an atmosphere, which suggests a film set on Earth.
So the first thing they messed up was basic physics. You'd think the nerds would get the nerd stuff, right?
The next big photographic anomaly is the sky. In every single photo from the lunar surface, the sky is completely black. There are no stars visible.
Theorists argue that's impossible. With no atmosphere to obscure the view, the stars should be brilliantly clear.
The art department just forgot to paint them on the backdrop. That's a classic rookie mistake. They spent the whole budget on the flag and ran out of glitter.
Then there are the shadows. In many Apollo photos, the shadows cast by astronauts and equipment aren't parallel to each other. Hoax proponents claim this proves the use of multiple artificial light sources, like on a film set instead of the single distant sun.
If the sun is the only light source, all shadows should be parallel. Deviations would imply a light source that is much closer, or multiple lights at different angles.
It's basic film noir lighting. You need a key light, a fill light, and apparently you need them on the moon.
Moving beyond photos, there is the issue of the Van Allen belts, rings of intense radiation that surround the Earth. Theorists present these as a lethal, unavoidable barrier.
The claim is that the level of radiation inside these belts is so high that the relatively thin aluminum hull of the Apollo command module wouldn't have been enough to protect the astronauts.
So it's like a video game level you can't get past without a cheat code. And NASA didn't have the cheat code in 1969.
Finally, there is the landing itself. The lunar module weighed over 17 tons and its descent engine fired with thousands of pounds of thrust. Yet, in the photos, it's sitting on nearly pristine, undisturbed lunar soil.
You'd expect a significant blast crater directly underneath the engine nozzle. There isn't one.
But Neil Armstrong's boot print is deeper than the mark left by a 17-ton rocket ship. I leave a bigger dent in my couch when I sit down. Something's not adding up.
There is also the famous C rock. One photograph clearly shows a rock with what looks like a perfectly formed letter C on it. Theorists claim this is obviously a prop, mislabeled or accidentally turned toward the camera.
A prop marker, like rock C, take 2.
C, that's just lazy. If you're faking the moon landing, at least use rocks that don't have letters on them. That's day one stuff.
Then you have the crosshairs. The Hasselblad cameras the astronauts used had glass plates with crosshairs etched on them, which should appear on top of every image. But in some photos, the crosshairs seem to disappear behind bright white objects.
Which would imply the crosshairs were part of the original image, and a white object was added on top later. In other words, a doctored photo.
It's the world's first ever Photoshop fail. They didn't know about layers yet.
And this all feeds into the wildest sub-theory that NASA, needing a truly convincing film, secretly hired the one director who could pull it off: Stanley Kubrick.
Of course, his movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, came out just a year before the landing. It looked so real. People say he basically shot a sequel for the government.
Okay, let's step back and separate the claims from the facts. A waving flag, no stars, weird shadows. These are all things that are genuinely in the NASA photos. The question isn't whether they exist, it's what they mean.
And each one has a well-documented scientific explanation. The flag waved because of momentum from being twisted into the ground. In a vacuum with no air resistance, those ripples continued. The lack of stars is simple camera exposure. The lunar surface was brilliantly lit by the sun, so the camera's shutter speed was too fast, and the aperture too small to capture faint starlight.
So it's like trying to take a picture of a birthday candle in a brightly lit stadium. You're not going to see the stars in the background.
And the shadows.
That's just perspective. The uneven, hilly lunar surface makes parallel shadows appear to converge or diverge, just like railway tracks seem to meet in the distance. There was no second light source.
All right, what about the Van Allen belts? That's not a photo trick. That's hard physics. Were they a lethal threat or not?
The threat is real, but the danger was mitigated. The Apollo missions flew a specific trajectory that passed through the weakest parts of the belts very quickly, minimizing the astronauts' radiation exposure to perfectly safe levels. In fact, James Van Allen, the man who discovered the belts, personally and publicly refuted the claims that they were impassable.
That is the ultimate fact check. The guy who literally wrote the book on the Van Allen belts tells you you're wrong about the Van Allen belts. Tough day for the hoax team.
But it gets even worse for the hoax theory. Beyond expert refutations, you have the physical evidence that came back.
The 842 pounds of lunar rocks returned across the 6 Apollo missions. Scientists all over the world have verified their unique composition. They show evidence of formation in a total vacuum, with no exposure to water, and their surfaces are pitted by micrometeorites. You cannot replicate those conditions on Earth.
So you're telling me you'd have to not only fake the moon landing, but also fake a trip to a rock factory on a different, secret, airless moon just to get the props. That's a lot of work.
And there is evidence we left behind that's still in use. The Apollo missions deployed laser-ranging retroreflectors on the surface.
These are essentially sophisticated mirrors. And crucially, observatories on Earth that have no affiliation with NASA can, and routinely do, bounce lasers off them to measure the moon's distance with incredible precision. They are actively pinging 1960s hardware that is sitting right where we left it.
So a bunch of international nerds with laser pointers are the ultimate buzzkill for this whole thing.
But for me, the most powerful evidence against a hoax isn't scientific, it's political. It's the silence of the Soviet Union.
They had every motive to expose a fake. It would have been a world-shattering propaganda victory. They also had the technical ability to track the radio signals from the Apollo spacecraft. If those signals were coming from low Earth orbit or a TV studio instead of the moon, they would have known.
And they said nothing. That's like catching your arch-rival cheating at the Olympics and just shrugging. You wouldn't do it. You'd call a press conference so fast it would break the sound barrier.
Which brings us to the human scale, the sheer number of people involved. NASA estimates over 400,000 employees and contractors worked on the Apollo program for a decade.
The idea that every single one of them has kept that secret for over 50 years, with no deathbed confessions, no leaked memos, no disgruntled tell-alls, is statistically unthinkable.
I can't get 3 friends to keep a surprise party under wraps for a week. The idea that 400,000 people kept the biggest secret in human history is more fantastical than the landing itself.
So if the evidence for the landing is so overwhelming, why does the hoax theory persist? To answer that, you have to look not at what was claimed, but when.
The theory didn't gain significant popular traction right after 1969. It really took root in the mid-1970s. And that timing is the key.
The country was reeling from the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. For the first time, a majority of Americans felt deep distrust toward their own government. The soil was fertile for conspiracy.
It's a powerful psychological release valve. The world is complicated and often feels out of your control. Believing in a massive, simple deception by a powerful them can be more comforting than accepting the messy reality that sometimes incredible things are just achieved by smart people working very hard.
It reframes a complex human achievement into a simple, cynical morality play. It's not about orbital mechanics, it's about good versus evil, the people versus the powerful.
So it's the ultimate, it's not me, it's you break up with reality. I don't feel powerful, therefore you must be lying.
And the theory is sticky because it invites participation. It turns every believer into a detective.
Exactly. It's a do-it-yourself investigation. You don't need a PhD in physics. You just need to download the photos, draw lines on the shadows, and feel like you've discovered a hidden truth that the experts missed. It creates a sense of empowerment.
It's like the world's nerdiest escape room. The prize is that you get to feel smarter than NASA.
And that sense of discovery gets reinforced every time the narrative is amplified by the media. It's not just fringe websites.
From Kaysing's original book to that 2001 Fox special, and countless documentaries and YouTube videos since, the story keeps getting reintroduced to the public. It keeps the idea in the mainstream consciousness.
Look, if you enjoy having us be your forensic investigators for this kind of thing, we do it every week. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next rabbit hole.
Ultimately, the moon landing hoax theory is a story about trust. It's less about the science of space travel and more about our relationship with authority.
It shows how even our most well-documented, globally witnessed achievements can be rewritten as deceptions the moment faith in our institutions begins to crumble.
It's the final boss of trust issues.
A reminder that sometimes the most unbelievable conspiracy is the one we tell ourselves about the world being simpler than it really is.
Next week, we're looking at a government conspiracy that was horrifyingly real. For 40 years, U.S. health officials withheld treatment from hundreds of African American men in the Tuskegee syphilis experiment just to watch them die. Don't miss it.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Try to trust the science, or at least trust the laser pointer nerds.